In the beginning, a great flood swept over the islands, and only a single raven was left. Raven was no ordinary bird, and used supernatural powers to put the moon in the sky and the people on the islands. The people are called Haida, the children of the raven spirit. These were the mysterious beings who shared every part of the Haida world. The mask was created to transform the Haida into these invisible spirits. The purpose of my story is like the masks, to reveal a hidden world that lies behind the normal face of things. We left behind museum displays, old journals, and photographs, documents that record the history of the Queen Charlotte Islands. My friends Jim and Neil were as curious as I was about this remote place. Our 2 kayaks lay on the deck of the fishing boat for the 60-mile crossing from the mainland to the Queen Charlotte's, thanks to the kindness of the captain. It turns out he's descended from the Haida, so I mentioned our interest in the old villages in the southern part of the islands. "There's not much left to see," he said. "You can count everyone along that coast on 2 hands. I thought of those early maps of North America, and of what the fur traders discovered as they sailed along that unknown coast of Western Canada.
We have endeavored to find a new source of prime furs in those uncharted regions of the Northwest, and it was with this purpose that on June 30th, 1787, we first sighted that land we later called Queen Charlotte's Isles.
When our 2 kayaks were lashed together, they looked somewhat like the Polynesian sailing proa. The black sprit sails were similar to those of the Haida. The Haida passed down their knowledge of the coast from memory, but to the English, a map was essential. The first English fur trader, George Dixon, made this map in 1787. It's the first published document to show these islands. And although the Queen Charlottes were the ancestral home of the Haida, the English saw the map as proof of their title to the land. The English, and then the Canadians, have held on to this claim ever since. This modern chart of ours shows no signs of human settlement. No towns, harbors, or roads along this 100-mile stretch of coastline. We started our journey about midway down the Queen Charlottes and planned to travel to the southern end of these islands. A lot of time and effort went into making this precise map, but it seems there's no one here to use it. The Haida weren't the only ones living along this coast. Japanese and Chinese workers ran salmon canneries like this one. The salmon school along the coast, waiting for the right moment to enter the streams and spawn. The fish were a great harvest for the Haida, and every stream was owned by a particular family. They would have considered any fish we took from this stream to be stolen property.
While prospecting for gold in the summer of 1859, we stayed at a Haida Indian village. This proved an almost fatal venture. In the evening, a terrible wrangle broke out around our tent. A hostile chief was telling the crowd, "These white men have come to take our land and property from us. Come, help me put them to death." With the help of a friendly chief, we made a hasty departure.
We were camped on the site of a major Haida village. The wide beach was still neatly cleared of all rocks, as if waiting for visitors to arrive again. The only thing left of the village was this totem pole. The carving is most likely of a raven, though the long beak has rotted off. For the Haida, this carving told the story of their creation by the raven spirit. Yet to us, this totem pole now symbolizes the end of their way of life.
The ravages of smallpox have been frightful. Of the estimated 6,000 people, perhaps 1,000 are left, and the survivors never cease to dwell on this terrible loss. At the time of our visit in 1878, many houses had been completely deserted. When asked why, the Haida inevitably say, "All our people are dead."
It's hard to imagine the old photographs and this view of mine record the same sight. My impressions of village life come from a film made in 1915. This scene is supposed to show some of the events connected with a wedding ceremony. The blankets are given away as presents. The filmmaker documents a contest to see who can drink the most fish oil. When these scenes were filmed in 1915, the Indians had to reenact a way of life that had died out with the smallpox epidemic some 30 years before. I see this filmmaker as a kind of anxious parent, making home movies to try and preserve the vanishing childhood of the human race. There was another kind of filmmaker working along this coast who had little to do with Indians. He was the accomplice to every kind of destruction.
We're only about 20 feet away when the old man fires the harpoon. By the time you hauled him alongside, the whale's usually dead. We just go to the station to bring in the whales. Never want to stay there very long. It smells something out of this world. It'd turn white paint green if you stayed too long. And it goes on like this all day. The blood flows in rivers, and by evening every whale's disappeared into the boilers. Nothing much different ever happens here, except the occasional photographer up from Victoria. That's all of us crowded like a bunch of damn fools into the mouth of a half-rotted whale.
The days passed as we continued south, often with no signs of a human presence. I began to feel the mist as a cat's tongue lapping at the shoreline, and even the rusted boilers at the whaling station would soon dissolve under this softly abrasive touch. Yet this sense of time passing quietly by was deceptive, as we discovered during one strangely evocative day. We knew that a railway ran from the shore of this cove to a mine shaft, so we followed a pair of rusted tracks back into the woods. In 1906, a Japanese fisherman and his crew had staked out this claim to mine copper, and for the next 15 years, over 100 miners worked the lode. The rails disappeared under a pile of rock debris, and we figured the clearing at the top must be the mine site. Once on top, we found ourselves standing on a modern roadbed, and it was obvious the copper mine we'd been looking for was buried somewhere beneath us. We started following the road west, towards a point on the map called Jedway. The abandoned remnants of a modern mining operation began to appear around us.
Road construction to the pit site was another and tougher job. This is not hospitable country, and up to now man has been content to leave it alone. Even the site of the open pit has a certain quality of rugged beauty. The pit at Jedway had to be designed to accommodate a steeply inclined ore body which sloped down into the mountain. After producing over 2 million tons of iron concentrate, Jedway finally ceased operations in the spring of 1968, when ore reserves were exhausted. Never an economic success, Jedway is a chapter in mining experience that illustrates the element of risk.
The salmon spawn in the streams. After breeding, these salmon die, the end of their natural cycle. We did meet one family living along this coast. They plant their garden on the site of an old Haida village, and the discarded clamshells of countless Haida meals now fertilize their vegetables. The parents and their 2 children live on a houseboat because most of the surrounding land is leased by the provincial government to logging companies. A few years ago, the family had built a cabin up the coast a bit, but when a logging company moved in nearby, they abandoned this home.
And now a special report from the Queen Charlotte Islands on the continuing logging dispute. The basic dispute is simple. Rayonier Company wants to log as much of the southern Queen Charlottes as it can. Environmentalists are contesting Rayonier's claim that less than 5% of the land will be marred at any one time. They say soil erosion and a low recovery rate for some tree species will cause long-term damage. The dispute is now in the hands of a committee representing all factions involved. But as one committee member points out, all they can do is come up with options. The final decision will be political, and it's going to be a difficult decision. Logging is the major employer in this region. At this point, the fate of the islands hangs on the balance. Will it be logging or wilderness?
The octopus fascinates us as much as it does the children. This shoreline is still so abundant that if the Haida returned to their homes, the table could again be set as the tide went out. The children have grown up here, and for them this world is the normal order of things. As their parents said to me, on those rare, clear island nights, the kids used to exclaim in wonder about the beautiful starfish in the sky. We've arrived at Red Cod Island, at the southern end of the Charlottes. Haida mortuary poles look out over the cove, the last group still remaining along this coast. Other totem poles from this village were cut down for museums, but these were left standing because they'd contained the remains of the dead. A body was placed in the hollow at the top of the pole, but as poles crumble, the bones fall to the ground.
Sunday, June 9th, 1901. After breakfast, exposed photographic plates of houses and poles. I have decided to pay up to $1.50 a foot for the best poles if delivered to the coastal steamer. It's difficult to locate owners of these poles, as the few survivors of this village moved away some years ago.
This house had a name. Perhaps the house Raven found, or Killer Whale House. A house where one may always expect food, or clouds rolling upon it, house. Eight weeks of travel had brought us to this southern edge of the islands, and it was time to head north again. Taken in a straight line, we were less than 100 miles from where we started. If the weather was good, we might be back in 4 days, and then it would be easy to find a fishing boat to take us out of the Charlottes and across to the mainland.